All right, you all got an email from me today, and I was asked to provide a couple more resources, Android resources. I'm not going to go through any of these. I will tell you this one that's right here. I believe it's this one. In hindsight, that may have been a better one to use even than the Muroc book, because the one, and it's one of the few in there with a PDF. I think, like I said, that is the one. Let me double check. Oops. Android 4 application development in full color. So this is an entire book. All right, and with Android 4, it is, well, it says 2012, so that's probably not great. But got a lot of good stuff in it. How's that? All right. I'm going to literally bring up the same one, work with the same one that you have. I'll be adding code to it, but I just want, I'll be right exactly where you are. You don't have to do a thing with this. You don't have to write code when I'm writing code. You can do whatever you want to do with it. But the idea is, when I asked yesterday if there were any of you in here that thought it would be advantageous to go over this today, it seemed like there was more than one person who said yes. All right, so that's the idea behind doing this. I had it here. Let me double check. Let's cancel this. There it is. That's it. All right, again, as mentioned on the bottom of the page here, that's literally where I took it from. All right, and this whole thing that you saw here, that's all a graphic. That was from their site. All right, that's why I said, when a couple of you asked, does this have to be done the same way? It could be, but it didn't necessarily have to be. All right. So taking it from the top, this is what you have. And what I kept in here, if we go back to the XML file, I believe you should have everything that's in there. So this was the finished product, so to speak, without any code in it. All right, I can pump that up a little bit. All right, again, that's how mine looked. Some of you, I'm sure, didn't do it exactly that way, which is fine. All right. Now, when I look in here, I made two colors, navy and light yellow. The navy was almost the same thing as this primary dark, so I could have used that, but I just made my own colors. The light yellow is for the background. Okay. As far as the strings, these are the strings that I used. Okay, and I would imagine, or I would at least hope, you use something similar. All right, I had a title. I had, for my loan amount text view, my interest rate text view, my number of payments text view. All right, those. And then for the two buttons, the calculate and the clear, and then for the actual final payment on the bottom of the screen. All right, so like I said, hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, and I mean, looking on here, if you look like number of payments, I probably should have had a colon there, and I didn't put a colon. That's not that big a thing, really and truly, it's not. All right, so let's just take a look at the code. You've got a little bit of the code put in here. What I did was I kept for you, these are the constants that I used. All right, and you can see exactly what they are. Hopefully we don't have to go through any of them. All right. As mentioned with the interest, 0.01 is 1%. Now I've got mine set up so that you can, I was thinking that probably when the person ran the program, they wouldn't put in 0.01. They probably would put in 1. All right. So what I did was I kept it like that. I didn't check for that. I could have checked in code, but I immediately took the number they put in and I divided it by 100. So if they put in 1 and you divided it by 100, it becomes 0.01. So I did that. That's the value that I checked in my checks. All right. I had some strings in here. I just used a generic one. So this no input, try again. That's regardless if you left any of those 3 blank. You were going to get that same error. All right. Then these, I don't know if OOR would be acceptable, but you don't get all that much space when you are using a toast anyway, and you get even less when you're using a toast on a emulator for a phone. Okay. So those were the things that I had in here. These were the 3 edit texts where we were entering information. This was the payment amount where we were displaying the actual final payment, and that was just a toast. Anybody who didn't get a chance to copy this? Any questions on any of those variables? All right. Hopefully by now, you're to the point where all of that stuff makes sense. All right. So just taking it, from the top, so to speak. Well, as you probably guessed, so I've got these 4 variables. I'm just going to grab all this right now. In fact, I'm not going to do that. I need loan amount. So under this get references, I'm going to have loan amount, and I'm going to have interest rate. Oops. And I'm going to have num payments. Which didn't come in. And I'm going to have payment amount. All right. Why does that? All right. So for these things, again, this should be something that just makes sense to you by now, or hopefully it does. Equal find view by ID, and this would be r.id.edit edit text, and the first one was the loan amount. All right, so the first one is the loan amount. The second one is the interest rate. And the third one is the number of payments. Thank you. Now again, we also have the payment amount on here, sorry. So check and see which one that is. That is payment. All right. Now, because I don't want to take anything for granted, does everybody understand what those 4 lines of text are doing? All right. What they are doing is they are grabbing the fields that have been defined here in the XML. All right. So it's this text view, this text view, this edit text, this text view, etc. It's grabbing those fields because when they're defined in the XML, all right, they're not directly available to Java. So what this is doing is it's telling the system, I want you to go out with this r.id file and find the addresses of where those live. All right, convert them over and make them an edit text, an edit text, an edit text, and a text field. I don't know any other way to say it than that. All right. So we're getting references to the Android widgets, we're making them available. Now, I didn't do this, but if you look on here, I think I called mine like, for example, edit text loan amount. Okay? The reason I'm telling you that, I call this loan amount, but there's no reason I couldn't have said edit text loan amount. You understand what I'm saying? You can call your Java variables the exact same thing as what you call the variables in the XML files. If that makes it easier for you, then by all means do that. All right? I just did it like this because I thought it would be easier. That's the loan amount, that's the interest payment, that's the number of payments, that's the payment amount. I thought that would be easier. You may agree with that, you may not agree with that. All right? Questions on anything so far? Anything? Yes?
Mine's still up, but do you not need to do one for the button?
Question was, do you not need to do one for the buttons? Not with what I've done with the buttons. Eventually, yes. I tried to set it up like this because being able to do something with the buttons involves setting up listeners, and setting up listeners is what we don't get to till chapter 6. So I purposely tried to set it up like this. I'm not saying this is the only way that this program could be written. All right? And I'm sure that somebody else could write it and probably find things, well, you should have done this, you should have done this, or you could have done this, etc. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. All right? All right. So the next one, again, I left the comments in there, and hopefully by putting in those comments, it made it pretty easy to understand what's going on in there. For instance, we've got our 3 different things up here. The loan amount, the interest rate, the number of payments. So loan amount dot set text to the empty string. All right, interest rate. The order in which you do these doesn't matter. You know, what we're saying is which of these do we want to clear first? It really, you could do them in the reverse order that I'm doing them. I'm just going to do it in the same order that I have them right here. And then finally, the other thing we wanted to do is to set the focus. And it's request focus in here. All right, so it's okay. That's everything that I put into my clear routine. All right. Now, the good news is, if I now do a file save all, and I come back in and I run this, I should be able to test that. Again, I've said this kind of thing to you before. What I don't want you to do is write several hundred lines of code and then test it for the first time. That's just silly to do that. It really and truly is, because, you know, a lot of times when you come up with an error when you start, it kind of propagates its way through, and then there's a lot more work that you have to do. And I don't see the reason for wanting to do that. All right, now it says I got missing return statements, and I already know what those are. It's because all those other functions that I put in earlier, see how that returns? I should have just returned false or something like that. All right, so I am going to break the rule I just gave you, and we're going to write a bunch of code, and then we're going to go back. But does everybody get this? If I had just written that and tested it, I could run the program, I could put something in the first edit text, I could put something in the second edit text, I could put something in the third edit text, then I could click the clear button, all those fields should clear, and the cursor should be in the first edit text. Does all that make sense? Does that not make sense to anyone? All right. Again, that's just those 5 lines of code. And I tried to put comments with it so you could tell exactly what I was doing with each thing. All right. So that's the first one. Now, Colin asked a question before, you didn't put anything in there with the buttons. And as I mentioned, I didn't put anything in there with the buttons because it's chapter 6 in the book where they start talking about event handlers. All right, so we're going to cover that maybe today already. But the point is, the way that I wrote this is explained right in the comment right here. I literally created a Boolean variable that I called keep going. All right? And as long as keep going was true, I would keep going. So in other words, the first thing I wanted to do, if you go back and look at this, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to come in here and I wanted to validate this field right here. Okay? I wanted to make sure that there was something in it, and since it was a numeric, it had to be a number in there. It either had to be empty or a number was in there. So I had to check three things. I had to check first, was it empty? If it was empty, I put in a toast that said there was no input in there. All right? And then I returned. I returned false. If there was a value that was in there that was out of range, I didn't use defaults. I put in a toast and I returned false. But if it wasn't empty, meaning there was a value in there, and the value was within range, I returned true. Does that make sense? Because that's the logic I used here, and here, and here. That's the logic I used in all three of these. It's the same logic. You're checking different amounts. Here you're checking to make sure it's between 5,000 and a million. Here between 1% and 25%. And here between 60 and whatever the heck it was. 300, I guess. But the logic was exactly the same. All right? And the reason I'm telling you that is when I start to write these routines, you know, you're going to see just how similar all of it is. So, going back to the code. Again, this is how I did it. I came in and I created a Boolean variable that I called keep going. And I set it equal to true. And this was my program continue variable. All right. Next, I had double. This was going to actually be the payment when I get done. All right. And I set that equal to 0.0. And this will be the actual monthly payment. And then finally I used a decimal formatter. This didn't work. All right? But I did set up a decimal formatter. So I'll put it in there anyway. And I just called it C for currency. You can call it anything you want. And I set it up just the way we had been doing it. All right. Those are my variables. Now, are there any variables that are in there that you don't understand? This keep going is basically I'm going to say, hey, it's true, keep going. Then do something else. Check keep going. And if it's still true, then do the next thing. Then check keep going again. And if it's still true, do the next thing. If at any time keep going comes back as false, I'm done. And I just want to return from this routine. Okay? That's why it was set up like this. So you can go online and look at this. Some books, some terminology, sometimes you can see this referred to as basically, it's also known as kind of like, it's called an FSM, or a finite state machine. All right. I don't want to get into too much of that stuff, but just something you may or may hear of. All right, so I said if keep going equal validate loan amount. All right. If you look up on the screen, keep going is set to true. Correct? See that in blue? Remember, this is a shortcut for if keep going equal true. Well, I just set it equal to true, so it's definitely going to do that. It has to do that because of the way I wrote it. All right? But if for some reason it was false, get the heck out. All right? Again, as we go through this, you might look at it and go, geez, I didn't write it that way. The way I did it makes a lot more sense. But that's the way you should have done it. All right? I mentioned to the class today we were in Chapter 11, we're going through exception handling in C#. And I went and we did a couple programs as a class today. And the first one that I did, I went and wrote it, and then I went back. I thought, well, I want to see what the author did. And I looked at it. Hers couldn't have been much more different than mine was. I mean, we did the same kinds of stuff, but the way we did it was totally different. Isn't that to be expected? I mean, the way I'm looking at it is if you end up with the logic that you use, for example, let's say for your final app that you do at the end of the semester, if you all do it in a different way, that's a good thing. All right, because you're using, your own creativity, your own intellectual abilities, etc. to do it. All right. So, again, I'm just going to put this here. Validate the loan amount. Okay? Now, I'm going to copy this, everything I just put in here, all this. And I'm going to paste it in right below. No, I'm not going to call it again. But now I'm going to validate the interest rate. All right. And then after that, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do it again. But I'm going to validate the number of payments. So I can't really make this any smaller, but my question for you is, looking at this, can you follow the logic? It's just a flag, it's just a true-false that says if true, then I want you to validate that loan amount. And that's going to return true or false, and that true or false is going to go right in the same variable. Keep going. All right? If it returned true, then I'm going to reset that variable to the return value for validate interest rate. If it returned false, get out. Then we do the same thing with num payments. All right? Now, if I get to that point, if I get down here and I say this, if keep going, what do I know? I know I had a valid loan amount, I had a valid interest rate, and I had a valid number of payments. In other words, all of my inputs were valid. That's the only time that I want to actually calculate the payment. Does that make sense? All right. I've already caught it. If there was something invalid for the loan amount, that'll be caught here. If there was something invalid for the interest rate, that'll be caught here. If there was something that was invalid, I need an else in here, another else return. But if there was something invalid for the monthly payments, that'll be caught here. All right? So what do I want to do? Well, the payment equals calculate the payment. All right? And you know this as well as I do. It's hinky the way that this thing works with like the toString and all the other stuff. So what I put in here was string pay equal string dot value of the payment. All right? And then finally, payment amount dot set text pay. This is not formatted. When I tried to run the formatter on this, it didn't like it. All right? So how could I fix that? Well, just thinking of it right now. All right? This field right here, that's going to return something like what mine returned on your test here. Instead of returning 400.76 like you have, you might have seen mine, it returned 400.75384567 or something like that, because it wasn't formatted to 2 decimal places. What I probably should have done is after I got this, I probably should have run the formatter right here. In other words, I probably should have said something like the payment, or something like that. Something would be equal to, and then use the decimal formatter on there. I don't want to do it now because chances are I'll screw it up. All right.
Do it on page.
What's that?
Do it on page or set
I tried doing it in here. Tried doing it in here, and I tried doing it in there. And it, okay. Well, then you're better than I am. Okay. All right. Which one did you do it on? This one?
Yeah.
All right, then let's try it. What did I call that? I called it C. C dot format. Okay. All right. Cool. Then ideally, at least, when we run this now, instead of saying 400.75 and a bunch of numbers, it'll say 400.76. Okay? We'll find out. All right? And either I didn't do that before or something weird happened. I don't know. My question, though, is in what you have, what we just have looked at, is there anything that does not make sense? Brady gave me the comment yesterday that when he was leaving, he said, I kind of like this test. And I went and told that to Paul. Paul goes, that's not possible. No student ever likes any one of our tests. It's, he made it sound like I wrote a bad test because somebody actually said they liked it. But the idea was it was supposed to be hard enough to challenge you, but yet easy enough, maybe easy isn't the right word, that you could finish it in the amount of time that you were given. All right? All right. So the next one that's here is validate loan amount. All right? Now, again, if I come in here and for this one and this one and this one, if I just type in there, return true, for example, and then I come in here and I return 0.0, I could now run the program. Does everybody understand that? That if I wanted to write the whole thing up like this, I'm getting that squiggly here and here and here and here because in all those cases, it's expecting a return value. I'm not providing any. But again, I wanted to just give you this. I didn't want us to start from scratch. I just figured it would take too long to do that. All right? So, I'm going to start with the loan amount. Okay? And you can see the comment. This routine attempts to validate the loan amount. First, it checks for no input. All right? If found, in other words, if there isn't any input, display a toast and return false. You're done. All right? So if you get down next, then you know there's a number in there, but you don't know yet whether or not the number is valid, meaning it's between 5,000 and a million, or whether it's invalid, less than 5,000 or greater than a million. All right? If it is out of range, you display a different toast and you get out. All right? If you get down to the bottom, you just return true because it's valid. So in other words, like I said, to me, this was the most straightforward way of writing it. You may not agree, but I had two variables. I called it LASTR, loan amount string. That's all it is. And that's equal to what? The loan amount dot get text dot toString. That literally right there. Even if you're typing, just stop for a second and look. That's this. I'm grabbing what I put in there. That's it. All right? And since I put it in there, and it is put in technically as a string, that's how I'm looking at it and treating it as though it's a string. All right? I also had a double that I just called LA. I'm not real nuts here with names. What's LA? Loan amount. That's all it is. All right? So the first thing I wanted to do was to check for no loan amount. What does it say here? First, it checks for no input. If found, display a toast and return false. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this if statement. All right? So I'm going to say if the loan amount string dot matches nothing, and I got way too many parens there. Now, here is, believe it or not, this is a very easy question for you. Okay? Notice what I'm doing in there. I am just making sure the focus is still on that field and I'm returning false. Why? I'm asking you this question. Why am I not resetting? Why am I not doing a set text and setting it equal to the empty string? Why am I not setting that equal to the empty string? Because it's already empty. That's what we checked for. Now, if it's out of range, I do set it to the empty string. All right, before I do this. But there's no sense. I could do it, but it's already empty. All right. So again, my question is right here, is there anything in that if statement that does not make sense to you? What? That's something that gets put in by the system. I didn't type that. Pardon? It needs to know what it's working with. That's one of the parameters that the toast needs. All right, so it needs to know what it's working with, what the message is, and how long to show it. All right, and it doesn't matter if you put in long or short right there. It's really not that big a thing. Again, I think long is about 5 seconds. It sort of is, yeah. Like I said, it's contextual. I can't tell you any more than that. So, again, let me ask you another question. I'm going to put an else here. If I get down to that else, if I get to this else, what does that mean in English? It wasn't empty because we just checked for it being empty. So since it's not empty, and since we know that we set the type of edit text to a number, there must be a number in there. Does that make sense? All right. So, you don't have to do it like this, but I put a comment up here that said, check for out of range input in edit text. All right. So now, what I know now is there's a number in there, right? I know that. So look up on the screen if you would, please. Remember this loan amount? We set it equal to 0. Why did I set that equal to 0? Why didn't I set it equal to this? Because it might have been empty. And if it was empty and I tried setting an empty string to a double variable, it would fail. I didn't particularly want the program to fail. But now that I'm down to this point, I know that there's a number in there. So now I can grab exactly what I did before, where I said, in fact, I can say this, LA equals double dot parse double, LA equals double dot parse double. Why are you doing that? I don't know. But it is. So let me see if I can fix this. Okay. Wow. So I'm saying what I wanted to do there is to grab this. I wanted to take what I originally took from there and put into a string, and now since I know it's a number, now it is just fine to parse it. All right? But now I have to check for OOR, out of range. All right, so if that loan amount is less than the minimum loan amount, or that loan amount is greater than the maximum loan amount, well, then I know it's out of range. The good news is if you look on your screen here, I want to do all this stuff. I want to do all that again. Except I don't want that message. I don't want it to say no input, try again. I want it to say out of range loan amount. So I can copy all this in and I can change that message, but I also, before I request the focus, I also want to make sure I take all of that field and I blank it out because there was an invalid number put in there. So I'm going to just grab all this, paste it in, but again, make sure that if you're doing a lot of copy and pasting like that, all right, then make sure that you change that message because this should have been, what is it, loan amount OOR. All right, and then I want to show it, and then before I even request the focus, I said loan amount dot set text to the empty string. The good news is Evan just told me if we were here, it was empty. And I said, what happens if it's here? And he said there was something in it, which is correct. All right. But if I've gotten down to here, not only is there something in there, but it's actually valid. So outside of that, now all I have to do is return true. That's the whole routine. And the good news is, the way that I did it like this routine is going to be exactly the same for the other two. Except instead of using loan amount, I'm going to first use interest rate, and then I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to use num payments. Again, there's no magic here. I tried to write this in what I considered to be the easiest way for somebody looking at it to be able to understand it. All right. Now, did I succeed or fail? I don't know. But like I said, to me, what I did made sense. Again, you may agree with that. You may not agree with that. So I'm asking, we can go through the whole thing again, but is there anything that's in there that does not make sense to you? If it still doesn't make sense, because I had one of the first year students ask me, they said, you know, when we go over stuff in class, it just makes total sense. Then I go to do it on my own, and I'm like totally lost. I don't know if I forgot stuff. I don't know what the problem is. And I said, sometimes then, what I've started to do, not with you guys here, but what I've started to do with them is I'm writing very few comments in the program. And the reason for that is I've told them, if you're confused, you go back and fill in all the comments at the appropriate places. Because think about what a comment is, okay? Let's assume that I'm applying for a job and Brady's interviewing me. Brady's an HR person. And if he's an HR person, he probably doesn't know that much stuff about IT. But if he says to explain the program to him, one of the first things I can do is say, well, here's a hard copy if you look at the comments. Because that's the way, comments are used so that any person, be they a lay person or an experienced professional, all right? The reason that most people don't put in comments more than anything else, you know, well, I don't have the time. No, because they're lazy. It is. That's just the truth. All right? You know, if you want to come back, hopefully you're all going to be employed by this time next year. And if you all come back and you all say, you know what, you know, you're wrong. I did put in comments, or I did good. I'd love to be able to tell that to students. But as a person where my first job as a professional programmer was to go through this 10,000 line program, and I'm not exaggerating, that had 2 comments in it, all right, and used X, Y, and Z for all the variable names, all right, and used switch statements that didn't make any sense, and wrote macros to try to take this much code and pummel it into this much code. It wasn't very easy. It made it easier to learn the language because I had to. And when I'd ask people, I don't have time to work with you. Okay, well, that's good. All right. But again, we come in here, what do? We grab what's currently in there. So you can write a comment there if you want to. Grab what's currently in that edit text. All right. This will actually be the loan amount. All right. Then as it says, check for no loan amount. This is checking if it's empty. If it's empty, you put out a toast. You show the toast, you request the focus, and you get out. If it's not empty, there's something in it. If there's something in it, but it's out of range, you do the exact same stuff. So if it's out of range, you set up a toast, you show the toast, you request the focus, you return false, and you also take the garbage that was in there and you set it equal to the empty string. All right? If you get down to the bottom, you just return true. Now, to show you the magic, if you don't look on the screen here for a second, I'm going to go and grab every bit of this code. Everything that's between the opening curly brace and the closed curly brace. Everybody with me? Everything that's in there. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to paste it right into my interest rate one. Boom. Right now that's not correct. Why? Well, I want to make some changes. I call this IRSTR for interest rate. This is interest rate. I call this IR. So look at, if you would, just take a look up here and look at how similar these are. First, check for no input. So what do we have? Interest rate string that I set, all right, and then interest rate. Check for no input. If that string has nothing in it, set up the toast, show the toast, request the focus, get out. If I get down to this point, then I have to check for out of range input. So the interest rate is, do the parse double, then check if it's less than the minimum interest or it's greater than the minimum interest. Do the toast, show the toast, blank out the field, request the focus, and get out. If I get down to the bottom, there was a valid value. All right? So now that I've done that, I can go and again grab all of the code that's between the curly braces, copy it to the clipboard, come down here, paste it in one last time, and now this becomes, instead of interest rate, I call this NPSTR for number of payments. And I call this NP. So I have, again, virtually the same method replicated 3 times. All right? So what's left is to calculate the payment. Everybody in this room looks like they need a break. So let's come back at 1:45, please.